And meet the energetic cast of Wild Wild Punjab as they embark on a breakup trip. All this and much more with me, Isha Hanspal, at these times on WION E-Club.
Namaste. Hello friends. We did Dr. Subhash Chandra show, popularly known as DSC show, for 4 years, from August 2014 to August 2018. 28 states of Bharat. Of course, we reached out to all of you in 190 countries across the world. The show was very successful. Each episode was being watched by almost 25 million people every week. For past 6 years, the demand of the show has never died down. People write to us, people ask for the show to start again. Hence, we are beginning the show once again on All Z Network, also on WION, which is the global network channel from India. Again, thank you for your love and affection. See you soon at Subhash Chandra Show.
To bring the benefits of the Subhash Chandra Show to your educational institution, teachers and students, send an invitation to Juhi Jha at yoursarthi@such.org.in.
WION, India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide. Because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION, World is One.
Hello and welcome. You're watching WION World is One. Thank you so much for staying with us. This is World DNA with me, Hem Kaur Suraya, and here's a look at all the stories that we've lined up for you today. Let's start. States set for round 2 of France's landmark snap election. Voters in France's overseas territories and living abroad start casting their votes. Voting in mainland France to start at 6 GMT. Police clash with anti-government protesters in Tel Aviv in a fresh round of weekly anti-government protests calling for the release of hostages. This is hopes of a ceasefire deal rise after concessions by Hamas. Military leaders of Burkina Faso, Niger and Mali rule out returning to African Regional Bloc ECOWAS. Leaders of the 3 members of the new Sahel Alliance held their first meeting in Niger. Four NASA volunteers exit simulated Mars habitat after 378 days. The research module in Houston, Texas is part of NASA's research into what it will take to put humans on the red planet. US National Weather Service warns of potentially historic heat wave that threatens 130 million people, mostly in the west of the country. High temperatures, broken records and sparked dozens of wildfires in California. Special prayers and rituals begin in India's Puri amid preparations in the run-up to the iconic Jagannath Rath Yatra today. President Draupadi Murmu to attend the oldest and largest Hindu chariot festival. World number 1 Iga Swiatek crashes out of Wimbledon. World number 35 Yulia came from a set down to beat the 5-time Grand Slam champion in the third round.
Having a career.
Now it's France's moment of truth. The stage is set for the decisive second round of snap elections. The runoff will determine the makeup of the French National Assembly. 501 out of 577 seats are up for grabs in the runoff. 289 will be needed for an absolute majority. Ahead of voting in mainland France, voters in France's overseas territories and those living abroad cast their ballots. First French region to vote was Saint-Pierre, a small French archipelago off the coast of Canada. They were followed by residents of French Caribbean territories including Guadeloupe and Martinique, as well as French Guyana in South America and French citizens living in the United States. Polling stations in Pacific territory of New Caledonia open next. People in mainland France will start voting at 8 a.m. local time. Polls will close by 6 p.m. when projections of seat numbers are to be published. As voters prepare to cast their ballots, the stakes are high for the future of France's political landscape. French voters appear to oscillate between hope and worry. While several welcome the change promised by the far-right National Rally, others remain faithful to Macron and his track record.
I saw the map of voting in France and it scared me a little bit because the majority are with the RN. So obviously I don't feel very well. I think there are many of us who have this feeling. Many of us who are afraid for France, for the future.
It is not an anti-Semitic party, far from it. On the contrary, there have been representatives of the Jewish community who asked that we vote for the National Rally, whereas 30 years ago, we would never have said that about the National Rally, which used to be called as the National Front. So while it was considered an anti-Semitic party, today I think that it is not an anti-Semitic party, it is not an Islamophobic party, despite what some may think. So I think, why not? It's a party that has never been in power. We still have hope.
Opinion polls indicate far-right National Rally and its allies are expected to secure between 205 and 230 seats in the runoff. However, it will fall short of an absolute majority. New Popular Front is likely to win 145 to 175 seats, while Macron's centrist bloc will probably end up with 130 to 162. More than 200 candidates have withdrawn their candidacies to block National Rally from coming to power. However, much uncertainty remains if voters will go along with these efforts to block Marine Le Pen's far-right party. If the vote is in line with the latest surveys, the election will deliver a hung parliament. Let's take a look at possible options if the outcome is in fact that. The mainstream parties can pull together a coalition. Otherwise, they can opt for ad hoc alliances to vote through individual pieces of legislation in the new parliament. It is possible that none of the three groups will be big enough to govern alone. In such a case, it can reach a coalition deal or provide assurance that it can run a viable minority government. This will lead to France risking political paralysis. As a result, with little or no legislation adopted, a caretaker government will run the basic daily affairs. Some candidates in France have refused to drop out despite being in a three-way race that could end up helping a far-right political party win a majority in the country. For the first time since World War II, centrist Émile Chandler is among the holdouts. Here's the report.
In the first round of France's snap elections, centrist Émile Chandler came in third place. She had a quarter of the votes in her constituency, far behind the far-right National Rally candidate leading at 34%, who was closely followed by the Popular Front candidate at 30%. Chandler's chances of winning back her seat in Sunday's election runoff are slim, and candidates such as she are being pressed to drop out to unite voters against National Rally. But she continues to hit the campaign trail in a bid that critics say could end up helping a far-right party win a majority in France for the first time since World War II.
In any case, if I had withdrawn, it would have been a gift to the national rally. My final point is that I don't want to abandon my voters, nearly 15,000 of them in the first round. These are people who put their trust in me.
Chandelaire's constituency in Val d'Oise is one of roughly 100 three-way election battles taking place across France. Marine Le Pen's Eurosceptic anti-immigration national rally topped the parliamentary election's first round with a third of the vote. In an attempt to block the far right from holding power, 200 third-placed candidates withdrew their candidacy. Local business owner Mourad El Ferdi says he's afraid of a future with the national rally.
I'm really worried about my kids. What do you want me to say to my children, whom I encourage to go to school and to keep on going? They're doing very, very well, but what do you want me to explain to them? That even if you've got your qualifications, the national rally has banned you from certain jobs? How do you want me to explain the situation to them?
Opinion polls suggest that the national rally will win fewer seats than previously thought, and is likely to be short of an absolute majority. An Ipsos poll forecasted the national rally would get up to 205 seats, but for a ruling majority, 289 seats are needed in the National Assembly.
And there's renewed hope for a ceasefire in West Asia. Hamas has approved a US proposal for a phased ceasefire deal in Gaza, dropping a key demand for a complete end to the war. And this comes as calls for the return of Israeli hostages have intensified yet again. Thousands took to the streets of Tel Aviv on Saturday to protest against the Israeli government. Waving banners and flags, the protesters demanded that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu accepts the ceasefire deal. They also called for fresh elections after the deal.
I don't know. I really hope that there will be. This is the right time. The IDF wants an agreement. The Shabak wants an agreement. The Mossad wants an agreement. The people of Israel want an agreement. Everybody wants this agreement. Hamas now wants the agreement. It's everybody wants the agreement. We should have this agreement. We are here to urge this agreement, and we want it to happen now.
So we need to get those hostages back. Human life above everything else. This is what Israeli democracy is about. My only demands are that immediately after the deal, Israel go for elections. It's time to reestablish trust between the people and the government.
Israel says Hamas is still holding about 120 hostages, about a third of them now thought to be dead. Hamas and Egyptian officials have said the proposal could lead to a framework agreement if embraced by Israel. The apparent compromise could help deliver the first pause in fighting since November. This could set the stage for further talks on ending a devastating 9-month war. But all sides have cautioned that a deal is still not guaranteed. Hamas still wants written guarantees from mediators that Israel will continue to negotiate a permanent ceasefire deal once the first phase goes into effect. According to reports, Egypt will host Israeli and US delegations to discuss outstanding issues in a possible ceasefire agreement. Egyptian media has quoted a senior official saying that they are conducting talks with Hamas to conclude a prisoner hostage exchange deal. Meanwhile, Israeli forces have stepped up military strikes across the enclave. At least 16 people were killed when an Israeli airstrike struck a school in central Gaza. The UNRW school was sheltering displaced Palestinians in Al-Nusrat.
They intend to finish the people before the ceasefire. Yes, we stopped being mindful due to fear. We were sitting in the classroom and all the glass came down on us. Some people were thrown here and others there. Our children as well. They were crying and screaming. It's not sensible of them.
The Israeli military has claimed that militants were operating in structures located in the school area. The IDF said that it targeted gunmen operating in the vicinity after taking precautions to minimize risk to civilians. And after winning a runoff election against the ultra-conservative Saeed Jalili, Iran's newly elected reformist, President Masoud Pezeshkian, met his supporters and expressed his gratitude, calling his election a great step forward. In his first address to a public gathering in Tehran, he vowed to improve Iran's ties with the West. He also promised to get Iran out of isolation and assured the revival of the 2015 nuclear deal between Iran and global powers. Meanwhile, messages of congratulations poured in from across the globe. Prime Minister Modi took to his X account saying that he's looking forward to working closely with Pezeshkian. Russian President Vladimir Putin, Saudi Arabian Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, Chinese President Xi Jinping also expressed an eagerness to work with Iran. The big question remains, can he make a difference as a reformist? Political experts say he will face challenges in implementing his programs owing to the continuous conservative dominance of other state institutions and limits of presidential authority. Political analysts believe that the ball will be in the court of the United States and the West. Further, they also said that they do not expect any strategic changes to Iran's foreign policy, and much would depend on the US presidential election that's set to take place later this year. After causing massive devastation in Jamaica, Hurricane Beryl, that's taken on dangerous proportions again, heads to Texas. The U.S. National Hurricane Center expects landfall later today, and Texans are preparing for the worst. Some Texan cities have even called for voluntary evacuations, especially in low-lying areas that are prone to flooding. It is likely to bring 5 to 10 inches of heavy rainfall across the state. State authorities have asked people to stay prepared for the landfall and have warned of dangerous flash flooding due to the rainfall.
We're expecting widespread rainfall totals across the portions of the Texas Gulf Coast, much of eastern Texas of 5 to 10 inches. We don't know exactly where that heaviest rainfall is going to fall. It'll depend on the details of Beryl's track, but the potential is there for some isolated totals to exceed 15 inches in some locations. And that's going to lead to the potential for some fairly significant flash flooding, especially as we get into the day on Monday.
Now, Beryl became the earliest Category 5 hurricane on record in the Antarctic, and until now, at least 9 people have been killed. This includes 2 deaths in Jamaica, 3 deaths in Venezuela, 3 in Grenada, and at least 1 death in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. As per forecasters, Beryl, which weakened into a tropical storm, is moved back into the warm waters of Gulf of Mexico, where it is expected to strengthen. Jamaica, which is one of the worst hit, is grappling with the aftermath of the devastating hurricane. The hardest hit area was the island's southern coast that bore the brunt of the storm's eye. Authorities began the cleanup efforts, providing medicine boxes, hygiene kits, and other necessities to those affected. Now, as the International Monetary Fund warns the United States of growing debt crisis, we look at the rising debt burden on the world. We're talking about $91 trillion. That's a figure almost equal to the entire world's economic output. This mounting debt threatens to erode living standards even in wealthy nations. This massive burden, it's a consequence of factors like the pandemic, and it threatens to erode living standards, as I mentioned earlier. The United States is a prime example. This year alone, the United States government will spend over $890 billion on interest payments, more than it allocates for defense and approaching the budget for Medicare. The Congressional Budget Office forecasts U.S. debt to continue rising, with interest payments exceeding $1 trillion next year. IMF recently cautioned the United States on rising debt concerns as the country heads for elections. Despite the alarm bells ringing, politicians around the world are largely avoiding the issue. They're hesitant to address the tough choices, tax increase or spending cuts, needed to tackle this crisis. This inaction risks a future where higher debt servicing costs could crowd out crucial public services and also leave governments vulnerable to the whims of the financial markets. The consequences of unchecked debt are severe. Economists warn that exceeding 150% of the GDP in debt can have significant costs for the economy. In the United States, the IMF predicts debt will reach 140% of GDP within a decade, putting economic growth at risk. Beyond public backlash, inaction can lead to market meltdowns. Rising interest rates further complicate the situation, making borrowing more expensive for both governments and individuals and hindering economic activity.
I have a brief statement on behalf